In this Parsha Podcast, we will have, please God, 3 segments. This is year 8 of the Parsha Podcast, and I'm really enjoying it. In the past couple of years, I think it's been 5-6 years that we have a new theme each year. But this year it's Dad, which is like deep and deeper to try to go a bit behind the scenes, beneath the subtext, the substrate of the Parsha. And I'm liking it so much, I don't know. I don't know if I could come up with another theme next year that will top the one of this year. It's so wonderful. It's so delightful. And it's so enjoyable. And I will tell you that the last segment that we're going to cover today, please God, it's an idea that's been in my notes for more than a year. I've been saving it for today, for this Parsha Podcast, Parsha's Chayei Sarah, year 8 of the Parsha Podcast. It's so delightful. It's so deep. It's so wonderful. I'm excited to share. But let's begin with a warm-up segment. There's a wonderful and mystifying midrash at the very beginning of our Parsha. Of course, the Parsha starts off with the death of Sarah. Sarah gets the news that Abraham is about to sacrifice Isaac. It wasn't presented to her in a way that she could be calmed, that he's okay, and she dies. And she dies at the age of 127. That number appears only one other place in Scripture. In the beginning of the book of Esther, of course, that tells the Purim story. It tells us that King Ahasuerus, who would go on to marry Esther, he ruled over 127 countries. So to us, this is totally random, 127, the age of Sarah when she died, 127, the number of countries that Ahasuerus, soon to marry Esther, ruled over. To us, it's totally random, totally coincidental. The Midrash says something amazing. And the context of the Midrash is also kind of interesting. It tells us that the great Rabbi Akiva, he was giving a lecture. And the crowd was getting a bit sleepy, and they were starting to nod off. Think about this. This is the lecture of the great Rabbi Akiva. Really, all of our Torah Shabbat Peh, the oral Torah really comes via Rabbi Akiva and his students. And he's giving a lecture. What would we not give up to once participate in Rabbi Akiva's lecture? Of course, the Talmud tells us that Moshe, 1400 years before Rabbi Akiva, he was able to witness prophetically the lecture of the great Rabbi Akiva. And he was so amazed and so wowed that he thought it would be fitting and appropriate that the Torah be given not via Moshe, but via Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, our sages tell us, he really serves as almost the Moshe of the oral Torah. And he's giving a lecture, and people are nodding off. People are dozing off in the lecture. And he wants to jar them awake. He wants to awaken them. He wants to arouse them. He wants to pique their interest. So he says that Esther and her ruling over with her husband Ahasuerus over 127 countries, that is connected to Sarah, who lived 127 years. What does he say? Why was Esther meritorious to rule over 127 countries? Why is that fitting? Because Esther, she is the descendant of Sarah. And Sarah lived for 127 meritorious years. And in the merit of the 127 years of Sarah, her descendant, her great-great-great-granddaughter Esther, she ruled over 127 countries. Thus concludes this most interesting and mysterious midrash. A lecture hall. The great Rabbi Akiva was giving a lecture, and the crowd is maybe snoozing. If you've ever spoken to an audience in the past, you have a very keen sense of who's paying careful attention, who's listening intently, and who is spacing out. The audience doesn't know that the speaker could see exactly who's on their phone and who's chatting and who's really listening carefully and who's engaged. Rabbi Akiva senses that the audience is, maybe they're dozing off a bit. Now, to their defense, the Talmud talks about the lectures of the great sages of that era. They would lecture so extensively. This was not the, 45-minute lecture, or even an hour, or even 3 hours. The Talmud says that there were some lectures that were so interminable that the students who participated all became infertile because they went so long without going to the bathroom that it ruined their capacity to reproduce. And obviously it's a terrible thing. But it gives us a sense of the length of these lectures. Of course, the Talmud tells the great story of Hillel. Hillel the elder, before he became very famous, he had to pay to go join the academy. And one day he didn't make enough money from wood chopping to join the academy. So he climbed into the roof and was listening to the lecture via the skylight the whole night. And in the morning, they noticed the figure, the silhouette of Hillel, and he was almost dead, and that they had to revive him. So we know that, and this was Friday night, the Talmud also says. In the times of Hillel, that's a generation or two before Rabbi Akiva, the lectures were on Friday night, going through the entire night into the morning. These are not quick one and dones, quick sound bites. 45 seconds to respond. It might have been a 16-hour lecture, maybe a 24-hour lecture. Who knows? So, you could maybe hear how someone might nod off during this marathon. And Rabbi Akiva wants to shake them awake. How do you do that? How do you get the attention of an audience that has gone astray? You say something so outlandish, so strange, that by the sheer oddness of what you say, it gets their attention. And he connects these seemingly random 127s, the 127 of Sarah, the 127 of Esther, and that's the simple interpretation. But the Hasidic masters say something fabulous, something deep. The students were a bit tired, dozing off, snoozing, yawning. When is this lecture going to finally end? We've all been there before. But they're studying Torah. And the best and highest and most powerful use of your time is to study Torah. And Rabbi Akiva wanted to convey to them a message of how precious every second of doing a mitzvah of studying Torah is. And he says, if you were to look at Sarah, she lived 127, pretty long life, 127 years full of righteousness. And you wonder how valuable that is? If you were to filter that through the almighty system of reward and punishment, a fair reward for Sarah's 127 years of righteousness would be to rule over effectively the entire world, 127 countries. And you would imagine that every country, it has provinces, it has regions, every region has cities, every city has neighborhoods, every neighborhood has streets. Sarah, in her righteousness, every year, she did enough merits to be worthy of having an entire country. Well, if every year earns a country, maybe every minute gives you a small cul-de-sac, a small subdivision. That's how powerful it is. 1 second of Torah, it's worth the whole world. Every second is precious. Every moment is to be cherished. Every mitzvah unlocks worlds. Rabbi Akiva was telling them about the importance to not forfeit even a second of your life, even a smidgen of your potential. It's so powerful. We can say that the main difference between the super righteous and us simpletons, one of the main differences is the value that is accorded to opportunity, to time. The one thing that does not stale is time. And therefore it's the most precious. No matter how much money you have, you can't buy any more of it. And with your time, you can unlock veritable worlds of reward. The Talmud says that every righteous person earns 310 olamos, worlds, that you are creating with your mitzvos. You study Torah. You perform a mitzvah. You're creating an angel. You're creating a spiritual world. And when you die, the world that you are transitioned to, that's the world that you created with your mitzvos. 127 years effectively mean 127 countries. That is the size of the spiritual world, so to speak, that Sarah created. And every second, it's so powerful. The opportunity is so great. Don't miss out on an opportunity. Don't sleep. Don't snooze. Don't doze. He's pushing them. He's encouraging them to maximize their opportunities. One of the marks of the greats was the fastidious meticulousness that they accorded every moment. When the Chavetz Chaim was unable to account for 5 minutes of his year, he cried bitter tears because there was moments that he could not account for. Of course, that's way beyond us. Like this idea of keeping track of every moment and every second, that's the mark of the greats. But in general, we have time. We have opportunity. Today, there's more downtime for modern society than there ever was. Your clothing gets dirty, you put it in a box and push a button. It's much easier, I've been reliably told, than washing it in the river. People have so much leisure time. The average American watches 4 hours of television a day? Now, since the war, I'm kind of guilty of it as well. Not quite 4 hours, but I have this weakness. I got to watch the Israeli television to get a sense of what's actually happening. Leisure is great, but every moment is worth millions. And to waste time, it's a real tragedy. The great Rabbi Noah Weinberg used to say, he had this iconic line. He would say that if you're wasting time, it's suicide on an installment plan. 60 years, no AP, 0% APR. It's an installment plan for suicide, which is such a powerful framing. Your life. You have time. You have opportunity. It's not going to be forever. And we want to make the most of it. And we don't want to end it prematurely. And when the Almighty wants to take our soul, let him take our soul. But so long as we're here, let's make the most of our time. Wasting time, says Rabbi Weinberg, suicide on an installment plan. What a valuable lesson. Yes, of course, there's the beautiful image of Rabbi Akiva and his students, and they're dozing off. We've been here for 20 hours. We've been here for 26 hours. We've been here for 36 hours. People are tired. People are cranky. People are hungry. You imagine that there's justification for people to get a little tired. And Rabbi Akiva comes and says, with 127 years, you can earn 127 countries. That's the power of every moment. And yes, it's hard, but if you realize what opportunities lie in every moment, it'll be a bit easier for you to make the most of your time. Segment number 1, it's just the warm-up segment. We're getting warmed up. I'm rolling up my sleeves, exercising my right to bear arms here in Houston, Texas. Let's go to segment number 2. The beginning of the Parsha, it talks about, now that Sarah has passed, Abraham is trying to purchase a burial spot for Sarah. And he has a very particular parcel of land and a cave that he wants. And our Parsha really has a very lengthy negotiations between Abraham and the Hittites, and specifically Ephron the Hittite. And it seems to be told in very exhaustive length in the Torah. Now, just for clarity, the Hittites are one of the Canaanite nations, and the man who owned the cave that Abraham was desirous of, he was a Hittite, Ephron the Hittite. But in general, if you read the negotiations, the Hittites in general, the Bnei Ches, are featured very prominently in the negotiations. And the Midrash calculates that there are 10 times in the Torah that it talks about the Bnei Ches, the Hittites. And all 10 times that they're mentioned, it's in the context of this real estate transaction, where Abraham buys the Cave of Machpelah, the Cave of the Patriarchs, from Ephron the Hittite in front of the rest of the Bnei Ches, the Hittites. In our Parsha, chapter 23, verses 3 and 5 and 7 and 10 and 16 and 18 and 20, so that's 8 times it says the word Bnei Ches, Hittites. Towards the end of our Parsha, chapter 25, verse 10, it revisits the Cave of the Patriarchs, because that's when Abraham was buried there. And it again revisits this transaction, and it again invokes the Hittites. And finally, at the end of Genesis, chapter 49, when discussing the burial location of Jacob, it again mentions that he's being buried in the land, in the field, in the cave that Abraham purchased from the Bnei Ches, from the Hittites. So it seems like there is an effort to really connect these people, the Hittites, the Bnei Ches, to the purchase of this property. And the Midrash says something really interesting. The Midrash notes that there's a lot of ink that has been spilled and a lot of broken quills to write again and again and again the Bnei Ches, the Hittites, the Hittites, the Hittites. 10 times in the Torah, it tells us about the Hittites. Says the Midrash, why does it talk about the Hittites 10 times in the Torah? To teach you. Because they oversaw, they witnessed, they facilitated, they aided Abraham in his purchase of the field and of the cave that he wanted. And they witnessed the transaction and they attested to it. They helped the righteous Abraham to do this purchase. We're told about this 10 times because their merits in helping Abraham are the equivalent of them upholding and adhering to the 10 commandments. 10 times in the Torah, it talks about the Hittites and their role in helping Abraham. They helped the tzaddik. They helped the righteous. They helped Abraham. You help Abraham? I'm going to repeat it 10 times in the Torah. And we'll have lots of ink spilled and lots of broken quills to write Bnei Ches, Bnei Ches, Bnei Ches again and again and again 10 times. So everyone knows their role. It's not, some sort of, they were the title company of a certain transaction. Oh no. They are elevated, says the Midrash, to this level because they aided Abraham. They're elevated, and it's as if they fulfilled the 10 commandments. And that's why it says Bnei Ches 10 times. If you think about it, Bnei Ches, it's 5 letters. Times 10, it's 50 letters in the Torah. There are entire books of Talmud that are based on fewer than 50 letters in the Torah. And you think about how many millions of Torah scrolls were written throughout history. How many tens of millions of letters, all that ink, all those broken quills to just highlight the role of the Hittites. And why? Because they helped Abraham. And it says it 10 times because helping Abraham is so powerful, it's so impactful. It's like they upheld the 10 commandments. Now the Baal Turim, in his comment to the beginning of our Parsha, he adds another wrinkle to this idea. The Hittites are called the Bnei ches, or b'nei ches, in the Torah. The word ches, it's actually the name of one of the letters in the Hebrew alphabet. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Daled, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet, or Ches. Number 8. Says the Balaturim, if you look at the Ten Commandments in Exodus chapter 20, how many times does this letter, the letter Chet for the Hittites, B'nai Ches, how many times does this letter appear in the Ten Commandments? Exactly 10 times. Once for each instance that the Hittites are mentioned in the Torah. The Hittites, they help Abraham. And therefore 10 times we revisit their role. And the Midrash tells us that's because their role is so important. It's as if they fulfilled the 10 Commandments. And their name is B'nai Ches, which is the letter. And that letter appears 10 times in the 10 Commandments, once for each instance that the Hittites are lauded for their role in helping facilitate this transaction in the Torah. This is something obviously very powerful and very deep and counterintuitive. If we were to look at this transaction happening between Abraham and the Hittites, and specifically Ephron the Hittite, none of us would think much about the role of the people there to help facilitate this transaction. They're very desirous of Abraham buying this property and everyone wants to help him. It's a nice thing. Our sages are telling us that to help Abraham, that's not just a nice thing. It's like you fulfill the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments that the Almighty gave our nation at Sinai, the bedrock, the foundation, the condensed digest of all of the will of Hashem. That's how powerful it is. And we'll repeat it 10 times so you know. And we'll write the letter Ches in the 10 Commandments 10 times so you know. These Hittites, they have eternal merit for helping Abraham. This to me is a very powerful insight. And the truth is, in many places in the writings of our sages, we find this idea about how valuable it is, how powerful it is to help the righteous, to help the Torah scholar. The Talmud, and I collected a few of these citations for you. The Talmud in the book of Brachos on page 10b tells us, if you host a Torah scholar in your home, and you made sure that they are benefiting from your possessions, it's as if you have brought a Tamid sacrifice. The Tamid sacrifice, which is the most basic sacrifice brought in the temple every single day. That is the one sacrifice that's like the prayer, the daily prayer featured in the temple. Today we cannot offer sacrifices, but you just host the righteous in your home. And you make sure they benefit from your things. That is equivalent, says the Talmud, Brachos 10b, to offering a sacrifice. Second citation in the Talmud from the book of Ksubas on page 111b. Someone who marries off their daughter to the righteous. Someone who does business with the righteous. Someone who made sure that the righteous benefit from their possessions. Someone like that, it's as if they are cleaving, so to speak, to the Almighty. Of course, we cannot cleave literally to God, but the verse tells us that we should cleave to the Almighty by helping those who represent God in the world in a variety of ways. You marry your daughter off to them, you do business with them, you make sure that they benefit from your possessions. It's as if you have fulfilled this idea of cleaving to God. Yoma 71a. You want to bring a sacrifice. You want to bring a wine libation. You can't do it today. We don't have a temple. If you fill the mouth of the righteous with wine, it's the same thing as pouring the wine upon the foundation of the altar in fulfillment of a wine libation. There's something very powerful about being there to aid, to assist, to contribute towards the agenda of a Torah scholar. You assist them in any way, that is very powerful. These Hittites, I didn't even notice it. It's like you read it, okay, the Hittites, again and again and again. And you count it 10 times in Genesis. The Hittites, just by helping Abraham, just by helping facilitate his desire to get this parcel of land, they earn eternal merit. And it's like they have fulfilled the 10 Commandments. Let us never underestimate the power of helping the righteous. And now for segment number 3. This is what I've been saving from last year. If you read the narrative of Abraham's negotiations with the Hittites and Abraham's negotiations with Ephron the Hittite, it seems a bit repetitive. So it tells us, of course, that Sarah died and Abraham eulogized her and cried over her. And then verse 3, Abraham wants to find a burial spot. And he approaches the Hittites. And he gives them a whole speech. I'm a sojourner here, or I could be a resident. Give me a place to bury my dead, and let me bury my dead. And they respond, listen, you're our master, you're a prince amongst us. Wherever you want to bury your dead, you could bury your dead. No one's going to withhold from you their land from burying your dead. And Abraham's very appreciative. And then again he responds, if you are desirous to help me bury my dead, listen to me and select Ephron, and let Ephron give me the Parsha Podcast, the Machpelah cave. I'll pay full money. I want to have this as a burial spot. And Ephron responds, says, no, I charge you money. No. Let me give it to you for free, so you should bury your dead. And Abraham's appreciative. But he says, no. I want to pay. Take the money and let me bury my dead. And Ephron responds, okay, well, if that's what you want, 400 silver coins, that's between me and you. What is it? Go bury your dead. And indeed, Abraham proceeds to give him the money and to bury Sarah. There's a transaction here. Abraham has his deceased wife that he wants to bury. And he wants to buy a burial spot, a specific one. Of course, the reason why Abraham wanted this specific spot, it's a very special spot, as we shall see. We've talked about this in the past. But why does he want to purchase this? We know, because he wants to bury Sarah there. If you read the narrative, it mentions again and again and again the fact that Abraham wants to bury his dead there. And that's the nature, that's the objective of this transaction. In verse 4, Abraham says, Ve'ekbara mesi, let me bury my dead. In verse 6, it says twice. They respond, Kvar es mesecha, bury your dead. And no one will stop you from mikvar mesecha, from burying your dead. And then in verse 8, L'kvar es mesi, I want to bury my dead. And then in verse 11, Kvar mesecha, bury your dead. And then in verse 13, Ve'ekbara es mesi, I will bury my dead. And then, again, in verse 15, Ve'es mescha, kvar, and you're dead. You should bury. It seems a bit redundant. Certainly, if we were writing this, we would be a bit more brief in the words that we use. He could have shaved off a few instances of repeating, Abraham was to bury dead, bury dead, bury dead, bury dead. Take the dead and bury them. And of course, the Torah never says anything extraneous. So why is it belaboring this point? Why is it repeating it again and again that the objective of this purchase is to bury Abraham's dead? Question number 1. Question number 2. If you examine the 7 instances where it repeats that the objective of this purchase is to bury the dead, in 6 of them, it says the word bury before the word dead. The first 6, Abraham says, Ve'ekbara, let me bury, mesi, my dead. Kvar es mesecha, bury your dead. Mikvar mesecha, from burying your dead. So the word bury comes before dead. Verse 8, L'kbar es mesi, to bury my dead. Verse 11, Kvar mesecha, bury your dead. Verse 13, Ve'ekbara, let me bury, es mesi, my dead. The first 6 you'll notice, it has the word bury before the word dead. And then in verse 15, it suddenly switches. Ve'es meischa, and your dead, kivar, bury. So why is there a change? The first 6 times it says bury, the word bury first, kivar, and then the word dead, meisecha. And on the last time, the 7th of 7 times that it mentions that the objective of this transaction is to bury the dead, it says, Ve'es meischa kivar, it says the word dead, and only then does it say bury. And of course the question is why? It should have been consistent, you would have imagined, throughout. The Gaon of Vilna has a masterful insight. How many people were buried in this cave? So of course we know Adam and Eve were already buried there. And the Midrash tells us, how did they end up there in particular? Because after they were kicked out of the garden, they spent a lot of time trying to find their way back in. They couldn't take the direct path because there was the flaming, swirling sword and the cherubs protecting the way, the path, the derech, the way of the tree of life. So they spent years trying to find another way in. And Adam chanced upon a cave. And the cave bared the distinctive aroma of the garden. And he started digging to try to find a portal to get back in. And he dug until he heard a voice. The voice, the heavenly voice, the prophetic voice said to him, "Stop! You may dig no longer." If this midrash sounds familiar, I did cite it at the very beginning, the introduction of my book, not the one I'm writing now, but the one that I wrote and published last year upon a 10-stringed harp. Adam had found one of the portals, one of the entrances back into the garden. And when he got close, he was stopped. But he remembered this cave. And when Eve died, he buried her there. And when he died, his son Seth buried him in the same cave. And Abraham also chanced upon this cave. Midrash tells us that when the 3 guests came to visit him, they were really angels masquerading as guests. The verse says, Ve'el ha-bakar ratz Avraham. Abraham ran after the bakar. So the Midrash tells us the word bakar is the same letters as kever, which means a grave site. Abraham chased the cow all the way to the grave site. And he walks into the cave. And he sees the candle is lit. And he sees Adam and Eve there. Now mind you, no one else could see that. Only Abraham, who had the spiritual vision, he knew how special this place was. Ephron and the rest of the Hittites, they saw nothing remarkable about this cave. But Abraham wanted this cave in particular. And that's why he wanted it. And he goes to Ephron and the Hittites and he says, I want to buy this cave. And indeed, the transaction was consummated. How many people were subsequently buried in this cave? So Sarah was buried here. Abraham is buried here. Later on in the Torah, we read about how Rebekah and Isaac were buried. So that's Sarah's 1, Abraham's 2, Rebekah's 3, Isaac is 4. Leah is 5. Jacob is 6. Of course, Rachel was not buried there. She was buried in Bethlehem on the way back entering the land. But there was actually a 7th person who was buried there. Sort of. The Talmud tells us that when Jacob was being buried, and they went with this whole long procession from Egypt to bury Jacob, they arrived at the cave, and there was someone there blockading the entrance to the cave. Esav. And Esav said, there's only one more place here to be buried, and it's mine. because you already buried your wife there. And Jacob's descendants protested, wait a minute, Jacob bought that spot from you. He made a big pile of all his gold and all his silver, all the money that he earned outside the land of Israel, and he gave it to you in exchange for your spot. And he says, I don't remember that. Where's the documentation? Documentation, we left it in Egypt. So they quickly dispatched Naphtali to go back to Egypt. He was the fastest one. Go back and reclaim it. And meanwhile, everyone's milling about. Everyone's waiting for something to happen because they cannot bury Jacob because Esau is stopping them. One of the people that was there is the deaf grandson of Jacob, Hushim, the son of Dan. And he was a little out of it because he's deaf. And he communicates with someone, what's going on? Why aren't they burying Jacob? It's a great disgrace to the dead that he's just being held in limbo. So they communicated to him. Maybe they used hand motions. Oh, that man, that burly, hairy, redhead, ruddy man, Uncle Esau, he's stopping it. He's stopping it. He grabs a sword, runs over to Esau, slices off his head, decapitates him, and they bury Jacob. What happened to Esau's head? It rolled into the cave, we're told. And Esau was also buried in the cave, not his whole body, only his head. And in the past we've mentioned that tells us that Esau, he was really worthy of being buried alongside the other patriarchs, but only if you look at his head. If you look at the rest of the body, it didn't really filter down to the rest of the body. But there were 7 people that were ultimately buried. Again, 6. Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Rebekah, Jacob, and Leah, and the head of Esau. Our narrative is talking about the purchase of this burial spot. And 7 times it says, again and again and again, that the purpose of this purchase was for burying the dead. Why? Because there are 7 people destined to be buried there. And with the first 6, they were all righteous. And therefore, it says the word bury before the word dead. And the last one refers to Esau the wicked. For him, the proper order is dead and then buried. Says the Gaon of Vilna. He quotes the Talmud. The Talmud says that the righteous, when they are dead, they are still alive. They're deemed alive. The wicked, even when they're alive, they're deemed dead. So Esau, he was wicked. Even in his lifetime, he was deemed dead. So for him, he was dead long before he even died. He's been dead for a long time. He's dead first, and then they bury him. The righteous, even after they die, they're alive. So they're actually buried before they die. Because they're alive, the soul is still alive. And therefore the way the Torah views them, they're still alive, and they're being buried. So they're all, the word bury, the word kavar, must precede the word for death. They're not dead. They're alive. And yes, they're being buried first, and then there's the word dead. The righteous, when they're dead, they're alive. And that's why the word bury appears before the word dead. No, even the righteous will die. A second before the resurrection, the Talmud tells us, a moment, a smidgen before the resurrection, the righteous die and right away are brought back alive. There is a benefit of dying. It helps cleanse a person of the sin of Adam. Once Adam sinned, death is beneficial for humanity. And that's why Adam was not allowed to eat from the tree of life. Because then he'll never die, and therefore he'll never be cleansed from the contaminants and the toxins that are in his body as a result of the sin. So even the righteous will benefit from dying, but they're not dead yet. They're alive now. Yes, they're buried. They're buried. And they will die in the future, a second before the resurrection, the Talmud tells us. A moment before, just to glean the benefits of death, and right away they will be brought back to life. And therefore, it says 7 times the objective of this purchase. The first 6, for the first 6 people to be buried there, the righteous ones, it says the word bury before dead. The last one, Esav, he's been long dead, way before he's buried. And that's why the proper order, V'es meischa kavar, and your dead one, i.e. Esav, who'll be dead before he's buried, for him, it is proper to have the word dead before the word bury. I love this piece. Of course, there's a lot of powerful lessons here, but I love it because it's a sophisticated way of reading the Parsha. We just assume, it talks about all the Hittites, and it just says Hittites again and again. And it happens to be repeating again and again and again the fact that the objective of this purchase is for the burial of the dead. And the commentaries, they bring us a little bit beneath the surface, behind the veneer, inside the hidden inner sanctums of the Torah. And they reveal to us how every single letter, every single word is absolutely bursting with meaning and with value. Of course, my email address is rabbiwolbe@gmail.com. I look forward to your questions, your comments, and your feedback. Have a wonderful day, a splendid week, and a fantastic Shabbos upcoming. And please God, with the help of the Almighty, we will talk again next week.